for us. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you. I know everybody is busy. I always laugh when I read a news report that we have extra time on our hands because a group of change makers like this is probably quite busy trying to figure out how they can do even more. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I've been thinking about of late. The first is I'll give you a little background on Beyond Capital for those that don't know about our work, and the other is just a refresher. The second is that I want to speak about conscious leadership and why we think conscious leadership is driving people to do better now, and do better, not only meaning do good in their lives, but also do better in their businesses. And what we're seeing in our portfolio. And then lastly, I just want to talk about why impact investing is important, especially now, why it's important for you, and how you can get involved. So I'm going to share my screen with you and walk through a presentation, but please do interrupt me. Yes, thank you, Peter. That's okay. You can stay muted. I think you don't have a choice but to stay muted. So if you want to ask a question, use the Q&A function. Raise your hand. You can even do it by chat. We'll be monitoring, but I will periodically check because I think as I share my screen, I might not have the capability to see all of your questions right away. So, but please do feel free to interrupt. So, here we are. So, as many of you know, we have a number of different ways that we communicate at Beyond Capital. And most recently, we interviewed Dr. Jack Kreindler, who's a good friend of mine, a researcher and UK doctor. And he said this beautiful quote that I think just really helps open up the conversation, which is, you should wash your hands of the virus, but don't wash your hands of the people. Times like these are a great opportunity to think of others. He also said that people who are anxious, when they start thinking about others, their anxiety goes away. And we at Beyond Capital, and particularly me, just believe very strongly that thinking of others is really kind of what we should be doing right now. And that's really meant to be the theme of this conversation and how we can all do that together. So another way that we've been communicating is through our podcast. We've interviewed 30 leaders that are purpose-driven. Only one of them is in our portfolio. So it's really a way, again, to speak more widely about impact investing. And this week, 2 days ago, I interviewed Seth Streeter of Mission Wealth Partners. And he's got an incredible approach to wealth management. And he was describing how his team and how his working life has changed. And what he said is that as the leader, I'm the chief energy officer. And so I want to launch in here to share with you just more of our thoughts around how leadership is really key to seizing the moment during the pandemic, how we see this as an opportunity to serve, what our portfolio companies are doing, and give you kind of a broad overview of Beyond Capital through that lens. So where we are right now, we are maintaining a positive outlook that this current environment presents an actual opportunity for us to invest for both financial and social performance. As you know, we invest in basic goods and services, so companies that are improving the lives of individuals at Beyond Capital Fund, living under $4 a day, and then in our next phase, likely under $15 a day. And we see the demand for basic goods and services through the eyes of our our current portfolio companies as still being very strong. And therefore, we have a very positive view on where we can go from here in terms of allocating our capital and the capital of our donors and our LPs. Quick overview in this little cute grid for you all. Every dollar we invest improves the lives of 13 individuals. On the impact side, we know that we're reaching over 5.3 million people with our portfolio companies. That includes 3.5 million women. We've invested in 11 companies. We've reviewed over 700, meaning we've spoken about over 700 and reviewed thousands over the years. And we invest in 5 countries: India, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya. Our portfolio, just to give you kind of a snapshot, is heavily focused in healthcare and agriculture, particularly healthcare now. We're seeing as don't want to say recession proof, but defensive from the perspective of what's happening even amid lockdowns in large countries like India. But we have created a portfolio that is diversified and is focused on a number of different sectors meeting basic needs. It doesn't mean that we invest in everything. We're very scrupulous, and we have ruled out a number of sectors over the years that we do not think are sustainable or require too much subsidy. One of them is cooking stoves. Another one is biofuels, pharmaceutical companies heavily linked to pharma. We also don't invest in either. But this just gives you a snapshot of where our portfolio is. And then some high level statistics: 60% of our founders are female. Actually, 100% of management team members include women. 76% of our founders are local, and 100% of our portfolio companies are directly addressing more than 3 sustainable development goals. Here's a snapshot of our portfolio. Some of you might know some of these companies, such as Sanergy, which has received a lot of notoriety over the years. I'll tell you more specifically about what some of them are doing. We're also in the process of closing 2 more deals, one in a healthcare delivery company and then the other in a ag tech company, both in India. When I say that our portfolio has a 27% IRR, that just means that we have 1 exit in the portfolio where we doubled our money while improving 150,000 lives. Our book value under our unrealized IRR is tracking in the same level. And so we're trying to really help you understand and that not only can we generate financial return and social good at the same time, but you can do the same. So let's talk about some of the challenges that are faced by our companies. The first is liquidity. As you know, we are operating as a seed investor, and often there's already a limited access to patient, flexible capital at all in the areas that the companies that we're investing in are raising, meaning typically between $200,000 and $800,000 in their seed rounds. Now we have a situation where investors are more hesitant to deploy, or investment committee calls and meetings are getting pushed out by months. And so fundraising has been put on pause, and we have seen this impact some of our portfolio companies. We are working with them to help them think through what this means and potentially even provide the capital ourselves, something that we're actively very, very focused on. Luckily, a few of our companies also just closed their rounds, so they do have liquidity, and while they can extend that runway by cost cutting a little bit. The second area is business operations. So supply chain disruptions can be huge. One example is Kasha in our portfolio, which is a women's health e-commerce business that you'll hear a little bit more about later. But an example is that they've been sourcing their women's health products more from inside Kenya and Rwanda rather than from outside of East Africa, simply because it's not easy to get these products now. Employee safety and morale is very key. So we're asking every one of our portfolio companies, how are you educating your employees about COVID-19 and how they can keep themselves safe? We have also seen salary reductions, not so many layoffs, but salary reductions, which have been across the board and welcomed in this environment, of course, by all employees, showing solidarity for the companies that we have invested in. And then, just the small things like we all take for granted that we can get on this Zoom, but one of our portfolio company CEOs expressed to us that his team doesn't all have the same level of bandwidth to be able to work remotely and be productive. I'm thinking about consumer demand. There could be some defaults just in terms of, especially if it's a B2B business. We see a slight decrease in demand, although it depends on the sector. We do have some food businesses and healthcare businesses that are doing well. And then what I think has been most prominent for us in our portfolio is misinformation. So we're invested in a chicken, egg and fish business in India. And there's been a lot of press around how those 3 protein sources cause coronavirus. And those rumors have actually really hurt the business. I think they brought the chicken and egg portion of that business sales down about 90%. And then lastly is government. I mean, we're living in an uncertain time. I think it's across the board. And the India country lockdown came pretty fast and pretty hard. And travel restrictions, I think, have really, put some strain on the companies in our portfolio. But what we are doing to help is we are communicating very frequently with our portfolio companies. So we have an ongoing dialogue with them. We've developed a playbook, which I'm very happy to share with all of you, that is built on the best practices of restructuring. Not that we think any of our portfolio companies will need to restructure, but we wanted to share with them the tools and the expertise of our team, which does have a pretty significant portion of individuals working in restructuring. And so we're happy to share that with you. So hopefully you can share with others. We've been connecting them with the links to emergency funding, and just kind of collating that information. We've been coordinating with partners and co-investors, notably to help provide additional funding or help to kind of mobilize our networks if there are some investors hanging on the sidelines. And then we've also, we've just kind of been thinking through how we can provide additional support. So here's our portfolio company, and here's how they're turning the current environment into opportunity. So Bodhi Health Education is a health education company. They train healthcare workers through e-learning, as you can see there on the little smartphone. They have been building a resource page for frontline healthcare workers, focused on mostly WHO guidelines and recommendations for COVID-19 and other evidence-based information, but to disseminate so that healthcare workers can have the backgrounds that they need in order to potentially deal with a wave of patients that are infected. They also have been kind of getting more specific. One of the videos that they sent out was how to intubate a patient most recently, and they're just providing that actually as a free resource. And I think that the hope is that that will bring in revenue for the company on an ongoing basis. I mentioned Kasha. They're constantly stocking protective materials and trying to stock the products that are needed most right now. E-commerce is a very important sector, and their business hasn't diminished in Kenya or Rwanda. It's become even more important to deliver essential health products. So they're speaking with the governments in the two countries where they operate to leverage distribution channels and help alleviate the crisis. So they can really play a big role. East Africa Fruits is a company that works with smallholder farmers. Their impact goal is to increase their income, their annual income. They have seen a demand just in the stocking up from supermarkets, grocery stores, not so much hotels and restaurants, which are closed, where they also sell to, but the 30% increase in revenue at minimum in March, I think really helped the company to seize opportunity and not feel panic, which is easy to do in this environment. They're also trying to increase their production of non-perishables, and that will also help in this time, because that's really what the consumer in Tanzania is looking for. And then Karma Healthcare is a telemedicine business. You can see here the doctor on the screen seeing a patient. They've reached over 500,000 individuals through 24 clinics in rural India. They're partnering with the clinics, certain medical clinics in Australia, actually, to offer their SaaS at-home consultation service to doctors who want to use their technology, which is a proprietary technology that they've built. And they are also thinking through kind of how they can be more responsive. I think maybe to share some of the challenges that might not seem so obvious with this group, their nurses, you'll see the gentleman here in the blue shirt, are terrified to come to work right now. So they're trying to figure out a way that they can, have their staff still come in, because their clinics could actually be the only place that non-COVID patients, because they can't really do much for COVID, but non-COVID patients can come and still get healthcare in the time where government hospitals and other perhaps temporary health facilities are overrun. And then lastly, frontier markets. It's the largest based revenue company in our portfolio. They've improved the lives of over 4 million people in rural India with access to mostly solar products, renewable energy products, but also household durables, and now also some fast moving consumer goods. They've created 4,000 jobs for women. So what they're doing, they've realized that there's a gender effect on females, particularly women, like this woman here in yellow, who sell their products, because as the lockdown has, kept everybody in their homes, these women don't actually have the time or the tools to work in the way that they used to. So they're trying to help them with virtual tools and systems, and even help onboard other, what they call solar Sahelis, women who are selling their products in this time, to help with just generating income for those families, but also help them get their goods and services into the hands of the rural consumer, which is essentially their business model. They are prioritizing the delivery of FMCG, so the essentials, in addition to some of the normal products that they're selling. They actually have one of the very few licenses to continue to sell solar as an essential product in this environment during the lockdown in India, and that shows the strength of their relationships. Amazon doesn't actually have that currently. So I'll touch on this very briefly, but after a decade in the field, we really believe that we're poised for growth. Some of you know that we've been raising a $20 million fund to scale our impact and to fund social enterprises like the ones that you just heard about that are making a difference, seizing the opportunity in India and East Africa. We do believe this is an investment opportunity to invest in underserved markets and build resilient, recession-proof, defensive portfolios. Essentially, again, coming back to the demand for basic goods and services, it hasn't gone away and it will not go away. And we know that there are some structural challenges, but we also believe that when we invest, we're investing in entrepreneurs that can navigate those structural challenges, and the companies that I just told you about are perfect examples of that. So I think a lot of people get confused, just to demystify how Beyond Capital Fund, the nonprofit, and Beyond Capital Ventures will coexist. We see it as a yin-yang relationship. They will be separate vehicles governed by a co-investment policy, and Beyond Capital Fund will continue to engage the community, grow our following, speak to a wider audience, and Beyond Capital Ventures will take on all of the venture fund activity that Beyond Capital Fund has been doing for the past 10 years. Our goal in this webinar, our goal for you all, is to be a resource in thinking of your money as a force for good. So please know that we are here for you, and the content that we provide to you is really meant for you to be inspired, to know that it is possible to do well and do good at the same time. So let's talk about some of the leaders. I had a great chat with an entrepreneur who runs a impact-driven asset management firm called Satori Capital here in Dallas, and he's one of the leaders of the conscious capital movement. He also wrote a book called Selling Without Selling Without Selling Out, and that book is about selling your company without selling your soul, by Conscious Capital Press. And he said two things that really stuck with me. He's a super analytical guy. And we just said, what are some kind of thoughts about how the current environment might change leadership? And he said, a growing number of leaders are remembering to be humans. In this pandemic, when we go to work, we are the same person as we are at home. And I found that to be very inspiring. I think that that's what I've been working towards. I think it's what a lot of you have been working towards. But to hear it from somebody who I often consider very analytical and business driven, you get a 30-minute meeting with him typically, and that's it. I think really shows that there will be a wave of change in leadership when we are all able to resume our normal lives. And I know our lives, and I know not everybody's life will be normal on this planet, so I definitely want to acknowledge that. So here's what some of the 3 other leaders that we have interviewed on the Beyond Capital podcast are doing. Jeffrey Brown is incredible. He's our first episode. I really encourage you to go and be inspired and smile and listen to his episode. He's the CEO of Brown Superstores. He runs 13 grocery stores in the Philadelphia area. And what he's been doing is, and they're all typically in food deserts, he's been increasing their hourly wage, adding in paid sick leave, and also donating some of his trailers to deliver supplies. We also have interviewed Leslie Silverglide, the CEO of Mixed, which is a healthy salad chain, mostly on the West Coast. There's one here in Dallas. She's been providing free healthy meals on the honor system and partnering with hospitals to feed health workers. And then David Silverstein, a more recent episode on the podcast, he's got an interesting business that helps fight back the kind of challenge of healthcare costs that we all face here in America, and to take charge of our own healthcare. So he's offering families discounted telemedicine, which is a part of his platform, and helping patients dispute unfair insurance bills, which is the main part of his business. And yet again, in this environment, I mean, I feel like I'm just saying this over and over and over again, but socially responsible investing is outperforming traditional investing. I mean, we've actually seen the market drop quite significantly, but in this period, we've seen that sustainable equity funds are ranking in the top half of their respective categories. We're seeing that investors are stating that ESG is helping them manage their volatility. Large groups like BlackRock and UBS are sharing that they think ESG portfolios can be more resilient in downturns, and factors like good governance and resilient supply chains and sustainable practices do well. And I was actually leading a young presidents organization Jeffersonian dinner last night on Zoom, and the topic came up amongst 12 business leaders that companies will be judged, or the group thought that companies would be judged also on how they treat their employees that are working during the COVID pandemic. But that's anecdotal. This is research-based, and we believe that you do not have to sacrifice return on your impact investments. So let's do a little poll. I'd love to hear from you about whether you think that you have to sacrifice return to be an impact investor. So the question is, when you make impact investments, you generally sacrifice returns, true or false? I'd love to see where this group is. Okay. So while we wait for the results, let me just tell you some of the other statistics that we think are important when thinking about impact investing. So one of them, in thinking about not having to sacrifice returns, is that 80% of impact investors report returns were in line with expectations, and 15% of impact investors report returns outperformed their expectations. Okay, so we only had one person who said you generally have to sacrifice returns. So clearly, I'm sure you can all see the poll results that, I think we're on the same page here. But I'm going to get slowly into the part about what's in this for you. So at Beyond Capital, we also believe that no investment is neutral. And we think about that from the perspective of every single dollar, or even energy, or your energy or your time or your resources that you devote to something that you do or buy has an impact, whether it's positive or negative, or we don't believe it could be neutral. So it's either positive or negative. So with that, we want to challenge you to think of your money as a force for good. And going back to the Jeffersonian dinner last night, there are a lot of people out there that still don't actually know what an impact investment can be. And we believe that impact investing can be what it means to you. And defining your values is really the first step in being an impact investor. So here's some sectors you could focus on. We did not include COVID response on here, but that's definitely one as well. Current disaster response as well. But we believe that defining your values is really the first step. And then the second is really thinking about wealth consciousness and contributing beyond yourself and what a purpose-driven life actually means to you. And we believe in something called the CEO mindset, which is a mindset that can be applied to running a household, running a business, your school activities if you're getting a degree, but really it can be applied across the board. And it is a mindset that can be shared for success and that we believe all leaders share. And we will send you a cheat sheet on that, which shows the 8 attributes of being a CEO. But the last one, and we think the most important one, is contributing beyond yourself. And so we challenge you to change your relationship with money and to think about the emotional value. So let me take a step back and tell you about my favorite study by a researcher called Dan Ariely. He interviewed hundreds of companies, large companies, and asked about what motivated their employees. And we may guess, we could do a little poll, but we're not going to, but we may guess that it's pay, benefits, bonuses, foosball tables, perks, etc. The reality is it was emotional connection and trust to work, and trust and emotional connection to work. And so we would like to take that concept and challenge you to think about your money in that way and how you can align your investments and values and how you can embrace what we call the power of giving or the power of impact investing. So here are some quick tips, and we'll send you also in the follow-up email a little GIF, which you see here, to help guide your impact investments. So on the left-hand side, just look at that first. The tips are, of course, to define your values, recognize the importance of living a purpose-driven life, practice being wealth conscious, review your investments often, and do the work or hire somebody to do the work for you. On the right-hand side, you'll see just kind of some tips for going deeper into impact investing. So remaining active, co-investing with others was just there, avoiding a company that has positive intentions but is not sustainable, and investing in people, we think is a very important, knowing that you're investing in people. So I have a chat here. Okay, yes, thank you. So how you can get involved and help us. We are in an interesting phase where there's a lot of virtual content out there. We've been hosting Jeffersonian dinners, women impact lunches. We've been very focused on engaging the community around our work, which was our goal in person in 2019. We hosted over 30, 40 events and tried to bring together and convene groups to speak to a wider audience and spark a movement around impact investing. So we would love for you all to be able to leverage the content that we have and bring the power of impact investing to your network. So co-hosting a virtual event, we would love to do that, fostering a dialogue with your network about aligning money with values. We have a talk called The Power of Impact Investing, which a number of you have heard. Refer friends and contacts to our ambassador program and Beyond Capital Ventures. And of course, engage with us on social media. Every Tuesday, we have a podcast come out. Every Thursday, we have an article on the conscious investor. Today, we have an amazing Q&A with Jennifer Kenning of Align Impact, who may be on this call, but I know some of you know her, but she's an incredible resource for anybody who wants to have an authentic and very deeply experienced view of what impact investing is. So telling you more about our ambassador program, it's a way for you to keep a finger on the pulse of impact investing. It's a part of our donor tiers, and it's actually the most vibrant area of our donor group. We have 54 ambassadors in 14 cities, very engaged group, and some of whom are here today, that have supported our work, but also are learning about impact investing through our content and our portfolio companies. And then, as I mentioned, we're raising a venture fund. If you're interested, please reach out. I'm happy to talk to you about it, even in just a 20-minute Zoom format, very conversationally. But the goal is to provide the deep catalytic impact that we believe you all deserve more in many ways than ESG or socially responsible investing in your portfolios, and access to the rise in basic goods and services that we will see. It might be stalled now, but we will see in the most underserved markets in the world. So I want to leave you with the thought that conscious leadership is more important than ever. And we're here to help you cultivate that. And my personal motto, actually my and Matilda's personal motto, that the best thing that money can do is good. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm really grateful for your precious time.
Thank you, Eva. So we have one question from Sheen. She says, hello, Eva, and greetings from Zurich. With global travel restrictions and lockdowns in certain areas, how are some of your companies like Frontier Markets troubleshooting the difficulties with interruption of supply chain and delivery of goods to the last mile area?
Yeah, thank you. I would say twofold. One, they have very entrenched relationships. So they have been able to work with their existing government relationships, and their delivery systems are still functioning. So they've been able to work with their existing inventory, essentially. And in moving a little bit more to fast-moving consumer goods, the company has been able to source more easily. That's of course a pivot in this environment, but it is an essential pivot for the communities where they're focused, the kind of last mile. The second part of the answer is they're doing their best, which is why they have pivoted a little bit to be kind of more FMCG focused for the time being, even though it's more of a consumer durables type company. And so I think that there will be challenges, but the relationships are with the kind of the right people in the government, knowing that the value that they are providing from a social good perspective is very high. They've been able to make the argument to not have those challenges yet, but I think it's possible that they will. And lastly, just saying, we're investing in an incredible leader who is really capable of finding solutions. And so in backing her, I have confidence that even if challenges do slow down the business, or supply chain issues slow down the business, she will find a way to navigate.
So if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat or add them to the Q&A function. We will stay on the line for a few more minutes. Yeah.
So in closing, and if one question comes through, great. I want to invite you all to think even more about your money as a force for good. If you're already doing it, to think differently. And your money can also be your resources or your time, or even your profession. So you can think just generally about where you can have impact in your life. For us, it is a way to not only be a CEO, which is a very cool thing these days, but also to live a life of fulfillment. And so I find these conversations extremely inspiring, and to hear your questions and to speak to all of you. I know I've spoken to many of you individually over the past couple weeks. I do find them really inspiring and almost in a way kind of able to navigate what's happening in our world a little bit easier. So Stephen, how big is your average investment in your portfolio? If one gets in serious trouble, how much financial and other support can you give them? Many thanks. Great discussion. Thank you, Stephen. So we typically are putting in now about $50,000, and that's matched by one of our largest partners, the Eckenstein Geigy Foundation. So we're putting in about $100,000. The lifelines that we are considering right now are kind of in the $25,000 range, simply because some of our portfolio companies are in their what we would even call Series B rounds, and that's out of our scope of what we would provide them. So in that case, we would help them with just kind of relationships. So giving you an example, we have a company raising over under $1 million, basically. They're kind of trying to zero in on what the amount is. So that particular company, we've been helping just reach out to those potential funders to try to close the deal. Scale matters for sure, but I actually have to say that in this time, helping coach a company can be more valuable. So that entrepreneur in particular was not positioning her business and showing how she could take advantage of the opportunity for the smallholder farmers that she's working with. And when we were able to give her that advice, I think she was able to kind of perhaps get higher on the list of the investors that were evaluating her and potentially striking companies off because, maybe they don't have they're putting their budget to their existing portfolio companies. So hopefully that answers your question. And the venture fund raise is really a way for us to be able to provide more money in 6 months. We're expecting, we had our first close scheduled for the summer, but we're expecting to do our first close at $5 million in the fall still. Peter Brock says, great to see you again. Any ideas for me in Germany, how we can convince other families as a part of the federal initiative for impact investing to enter more into impact? The reluctance is still high as everybody feels they're losing financial return and the ecosystem is not yet developed and now hampered by Corona. Thank you. I think that it's a matter of pulling together the research. I mean, we will send you the 12 articles that we have about outperformance at this time. The interview with Jennifer Kenning on the Conscious Investor will be a good one as kind of a primer to impact investing. She's not small potatoes. So I think that there are a lot of examples of impact investors out there. And then at the end of the day, I mean, knowing that you're not sacrificing financial return, because I know that that's important to so many investors out there, why not feel good about what you're investing in and be able to sleep at night? I know it's a hard thing to say to somebody. And I think for many people, it takes them out of their comfort zone. But I've actually seen, particularly in Europe, Peter, the phrase, no investment is neutral. That one, when I walk out of a room after giving a talk in the power of impact investing, there are a lot of aha moments. So that may be something simple that you can share with them. I'm also happy to organize a Jeffersonian dinner where we deep dive into some of these questions, because I think it's good for people to hear from others about what might be holding them back from an impact perspective. Okay, everybody. Unless there's anything else, I'm, again, very grateful for your time. Please know that we're here for you, and we'd love to collaborate with you and your networks. And most of all, I hope that the content that we're providing to you through the podcast and the Conscious Investor is relevant. And if you have any ideas or feedback, please share it with us. My contact's right on the screen. So thank you so much, and wishing you a good rest of your week.